Good afternoon, class. We will stand for a quiet prayer and get our uniforms in order. Okay, so today what we're going to be trying to do is we're going to have a look at Robert Frost's question. And I'm going to preface this by saying that I'm giving you this particular question to do, I'll be giving you a question to do through Teams, and the deadline for that will be at midnight on Sunday. Okay, so that's Sunday? This Sunday. We'll get the date in a moment. You'll see it through Teams anyway. But I'm just going to walk through the Robert Frost question first. And also, if you can't submit the question through Teams, you can always just email it to me with a Word document. Okay. But anyway, our learning intentions for today is to interpret how exam questions are marked. So we'll be looking at marking schemes. We'll be looking at questions and kind of deconstructing those questions. We've done things like this before, but we'll have a look at it again. Next up, we're going to highlight the essay structure, the criteria, basically intro, main body, and conclusion paragraphs. What should be within my intro, what should be within my main body paragraph, and how should I end my essay as well. Next up, we are going to identify and replicate the PQE structure of the main body paragraphs. This is our point, quote, and explain structure of our main body paragraphs that we should be so used to right now. And finally, we'll have a look at what makes a good quote. And I mean a kind of a structurally good quote. Okay, how to incorporate quotes into our writing, into our essays, into our main body paragraphs. Okay, so let's get down to the question itself before we get into this procedure. So this comes from 2011, paper 2, Robert Frost question. Frost's simple style is deceptive, and a thoughtful reader will see layers of meaning in his poetry. Do you agree with this assessment of his poetry? Write a response supporting your points with aid of suitable reference to the poems on your course. Okay, so if we look at our procedure, what I'll be asking you to do is to read the question, then read it again, underline the keywords or code words, rephrase those code words, and then vary and repeat those code words throughout your essay. Okay, so let's go through it. We need to read it. We've read it once, so now we need to read it again. Frost's simple style is deceptive, and a thoughtful reader will see layers of meaning in his poetry. Do you agree with this assessment of his poetry? Write a response supporting your points with the aid of suitable reference to the poems in your course. So what we're trying to underline are code words or keywords. What exactly is the question asking us? Okay, and these codes come up on the marking scheme, and examiners will be looking in each paragraph of your answer for these code words or synonyms of these code words. Okay, so they will become through practice, you will be able to do this no problem. Okay, so if we look at this, simple style deceptive. So I would say simple style deceptive here is important, and also layers of meaning. Okay, and we have to say whether we agree or not. So my code words or keywords would be simple style deceptive and layers of meaning. And if we look at the marking scheme from 2011, we can see here it's the same question, 2011, and we have deceptively simple style, code DS here. That's what the examiners are looking for, and also code LM, layers of meaning. So this is what the entire essay hinges on, that Frost is deceptively simple and that there are layers of meaning within his poetry. Okay, you can also see that there's kind of indicative material to showcase what we're kind of looking for in this exam question. So let's just go back. Here we are. So I would write down here layers of meaning and deceptively simple. And you kind of have to brainstorm around that. So, brainstorm, spider diagram, whatever it is, however you want to. You can even just do a list if you want to list your ideas. And what you're trying to do there is you're just trying to connect your poems to it, but more so than the poems, you need ideas. You can't just have a brainstorm where you have, tuft of flowers, out, mending wall. That's okay, but what's more important is the ideas that you connect within these poems. In what way is the tuft of flowers deceptively simple? Where are the layers of meaning there? That's what we're looking at, okay? So once we've our brainstorm done, we need to order our ideas. Well, we should really select our ideas first, because not all of our ideas are going to be great. So we need to cut the chaff, get rid of the crap ideas, and keep the good ideas. Then we need to put our ideas into order. So we're of course going to want an introduction to start off, and we'll get into that in just a moment. Then we're going to need our first main body paragraph, followed by our second, fourth, or third, so on and so forth. So, how do I know which one to put at which time? What I would generally do is put my second best idea as my first main body paragraph and my best idea as my last main body paragraph. This just gives the examiner a good impression of your work, and you finish off with, again, a strong impression. It sticks in their mind, that was a good student. For a main body, our middle main body paragraphs, we have to think what ideas are somewhat linked. Not the same, but somewhat linked. So you can put those beside one another. Okay, so we'll say your idea for the tuft of flowers and mending wall might be somewhat similar, so we'll put those two together. Okay, next up, let's have a look at what do we actually need within our introduction paragraph. So as you can see here, what I would suggest is to address the question. You need to rephrase the question and possibly turn it into a statement. So your thesis statement is basically your entire argument boiled down into one sentence. Next up, you need to list your poems or / ideas. Okay, so we want to know what poems have you actually studied, so we know what to expect. This is almost like chapters or contents for your essay, letting the examiner know, well, what is to come. Okay, and then we need some kind of concluding statement. Without the concluding statement, we can kind of just fall off a cliff in our introductions. It's a really harsh break. So I would suggest some kind of personal response to the poetry, or some kind of finalizing statement that will bring us into our next paragraph. So we have a sample here, and let's see if I actually do address the question and have a thesis statement. Frost's poetic genius lies in his ability to affect a diverse audience, from a small child to the seasoned critic. Now, I think that's important because there's layers of meaning there. There is meaning to a small child, there is meaning to a seasoned critic. So I am addressing the questionnaire, I believe. Next up, outline your ideas and poems you have studied. The San Francisco-born but New England-bred poet enchants various readers with the strata, layers, of expression in his poetry, such as the relatively simple, so keyword simple, yet superficial idea evoked in the pastoral settings of The Road Not Taken and Mending Wall. Here I'm grouping my poems. Pastoral settings, rural settings, Road Not Taken, Mending Wall. The dialogue he employs in Out Out provides a familiar vehicle of communication. Again, simple. Natural imagery found in design and the tuft of flowers compels readers regardless of literary prowess, and simple themes are expressed throughout Frost's poetry, including the urbane acquainted with the night. So I've listed my poems here, but I haven't done it in a robotic way. A lot of the time you see kind of C and D students go, the poems that I have studied are The Road Not Taken, Mending Wall, Out Out, Design, The Tuft of Flowers, Acquainted with the Night. What's wrong with that is there's no sort of personal response, there's no engagement with those texts. So by adding a little bit of detail surrounding the text and also listing my ideas that I'm going to be talking about in regard to those texts, I set myself aside as someone who has engaged with these texts, has thought about these texts, rather than just someone who has to study them. Okay? And this is the final section of our intro, the personal response, the kind of concluding statement. So I'm going to come back to the question here and offer some of my own thoughts on the question. Although his poetry can be deciphered in many degrees, I feel that it is unfair to deem his poetry deceptive. Keyword of the question, as it hints that Frost's intention is to misguide. On the contrary, I believe he intends to provide a forum for thought and introspection with his sublime poetry. So I'm disagreeing with the question that it's deceptively simple, because I feel as though deceptive is an unfair word. Yes, there are many layers, but not necessarily deceptive, because it's not Frost's intention to deceive us. He wants to guide us. So that is my introduction, and you're not going to write an introduction like that straight away. It's going to take practice, but you can kind of see the structure there. So if we look at our learning intentions, we know how to do an intro now. So let's move on to a main body paragraph. So you can see here that I have some subheadings. You are not going to use subheadings when you're writing your essay. There's no need to. It's too overt, it's too obvious, okay, for the examiner. The reason I've done this is just so you can clearly tell what is my main point for each paragraph, okay? So, and I've done this anyway, because even if narrative paragraph 1 wasn't here, I still have the very first word of my paragraph as storytelling, which is narrative. So the examiner is going to know straight away, okay, this paragraph is about narrative, it's about storytelling, and the narrative style of Robert Frost's poetry. So, storytelling is one of the most basic ways of expressing ideas, and Frost cleverly employs narrative aspects in his poetry to explore profound thoughts. So, within this first statement, this is my point. This is my P of the PQE. Okay? That's storytelling, basic way of expressing idea, simple, but he uses it to explore profound thoughts. So that's highlighting the different layers of meaning. The vehicle Frost used to transport our understanding from the elementary to the extraordinary is the inclusion of conflict in the form of an antagonist. So again, this follows on from my point here in yellow, that the use of an antagonist, of some sort of conflict, some sort of enemy in his poetry is a very simple idea. So in Mending Wall, the speaker is quarrelling over the importance of a stone wall with his neighbour. Each character's beliefs can be reduced to something there is that doesn't love a wall, for the narrator, and good fences make good neighbours, for their neighbour. Their clear disagreement makes us ponder our own feelings. So if we look here, this is the part of the question that I have included some quotation here. Okay, so Mending Wall, the name of the poem. Speaker is quarrelling over the importance of a stone wall with his neighbour. Each character's beliefs can be reduced to something there is that doesn't love a wall, for the narrator, and good fences make good neighbours, for the neighbour. I have my quotations there, and they are incorporated. So if I was to take away these quotation marks, then the sentence would still make sense. That's an important aspect of our quotations, and we'll get onto that at the end of the video. Here we get on to the explain portion of my writing, of my paragraph. So we have P, we have Q, and then we have E. Their clear disagreement makes us ponder our own feelings, not only on physical barriers, but also the mental and emotional fences we erect in our lives. A similarly potent theme is explored in Out Out, with the inclusion of the villainous buzzsaw that leaped toward the innocent boy's hand, ultimately killing him. The conflict present in the latter poem also allows readers to explore the transience and fragility of life. The ordinary struggle of characters evident in Frost's poetry creates a forum for more complex thought. So again, that's my explanation there. I could go on a little bit more, and you can see actually I brought in another poem, which I wouldn't recommend you do now. It's something that we will work towards. So you can leave that out for now and just discuss the one poem, because we don't want to overcomplicate our paragraphs just yet. So we're going to move on to setting here. The environments of Frost's poetry are not extravagant, yet still yield magnificent expression on wider themes, particularly in the atmospheric Acquainted with the Night and the multifaceted The Road Not Taken. Frost communicates complex theories about urban life and Acquainted with the Night through subtle description. The metaphor, comparing the moon to a luminary clock at unearthly height, transforms a natural heavenly body to something mechanical and artificial. Similarly, in The Road Not Taken, there is a wonderful setting in the Yellow Wood that facilitates great thought on the theme of indecision. These settings provide a sense of atmosphere for the reader, but can release a plethora of meaning when looked at under a finer lens. So, my main point here is that the settings provide atmosphere at a simple level, but at a more complex level, they can release more meaning, more themes, deeper themes. Okay? Again, I've dealt with two poems there, so it's not what I want you guys to do at the moment. Let's look at the symbols one. The symbolic resonance of Frost's poetry is manifold, so there's multiple layers, manifold. It is through Frost's comparison that he can so provide such a variety of meaning. Again, keywords of the question. The dimpled spider in design is a perfect example of how Frost's use of allegory conveys a simple message on the surface, but upon meditation leads us to a process complex topic like that of intelligent design. So allegory here just is a symbolic story, sometimes using personification, but for the most part, just a symbolic story. Okay, so it's a simple message. It's, a spider on top of a heel flower, and it's eating a moth. But that's just the symbol. That's just the very simple idea. When we look at it further, we look into the teleological argument by Thomas Aquinas. There's so much more to talk about. But anyway, moving on with the question. The ordinary story of a moth being eaten by a spider is one we can all envision. So it's a very simple image. But only when Frost questions the purpose and justification of these actions, with what but design of darkness to appall, do we register the link between the natural order and Thomas Aquinas' teleological theory that all things were designed by God with a specific purpose. The seamless transition from natural imagery to thoughts on a creator clearly illustrates how Frost is a master of his art, but one that could be easily misunderstood as a base craftsman. So this paragraph is more in line of what I want you guys to do. So if we look at my point, the symbolic resonance of Frost poetry is manifold. Very simple statement. So it's through Frost comparisons that it can provide such a variety of meaning. So this is my main point here. Symbolic resonance of Frost poetry is manifold. It is through Frost's comparisons that he can provide such a variety of meaning. Clear point. Next up, the ordinary story of a moth being eaten by spiders, one we can all envision, only when Frost questions the purpose and justification of these actions with what but design of darkness to appall. So there's my quotation that is important to my point. Okay, I'll put that in green for now. And then we have my explanation. Seamless transition from natural imagery to thoughts on a creator clearly illustrate how Frost is a master of his art, but one that could be easily misunderstood as a base craftsman. So this is me just saying, you can read it in a very simple way, where Frost seems like a very simple poet, or you can look at it in a much deeper way and see the true craftsmanship of his poetry. So I'm going to just have a look at perhaps my ambiguity paragraph, and then we can move on to the conclusion and we can just hammer home what exactly I want from you guys. Okay? So ambiguity, which basically is uncertainty, the openness to multiple meanings. So one of the most difficult aspects of Frost poetry is the ambiguity attached to each work. There's my point. His work can be, open to interpretation. In my reading of his poetry, I was at first taken aback by the absence of any concrete conclusions. Only upon reflection did I come to understand that Frost is merely facilitating our own ideas on mankind and the human condition. So here's my point. And what I really like here is the use of the first person pronoun, I. So I have that personal response which examiners are looking for. Okay? In design, the poet leaves us with a highly conditional phrase, if design govern in a thing so small. This provides the reader with the opportunity to meditate on their own ideas of intelligent design, to come to their own conclusions on a topic that is deeply personal and uncertain. Likewise, in his poem Out, multiple meanings can be derived by the reader, particularly at the culmination of the poem in, and they, since they were not the one dead, turned to their affairs. So here is my quotation part of my paragraph. And you can see that the quotations are propping up my points. Frost doesn't say that this is a brutal treatment by the family toward their dead kin, or that this is the only option when grieving the dead. It, like many other aspects of his poetry, are left for the reader to decipher. This can be extremely difficult for the reader, and only one confident in their abilities will recognise this aspect of his work. So this is referring to the question that it's not simple, that there are layers of meaning here. Once you engage with the poetry, you get more out of it. Once you put more in, you get more out. Okay? Again, showing that it's not simple and there are many layers. Now, if we have a look at the conclusion here, and what I want to do with my conclusion, if I go to my Boland essay, so I'm just going to show you here. So again, introduction, address the question, thesis statement, list poems, ideas, and concluding statement. And you can see again, I've split up the point, quotation, and explanation. But if we go towards the conclusion, what I want to do here is essentially, I want to rephrase the question. I want to address the question once again. I want to remind my readers of my ideas, remind them what I was saying, okay? And then finally, just like with my introduction, I want to have some sort of personal response. I want to finish strong with a concluding statement, basically answer the question that was being asked. So, the variety of understanding that a reader can yield from Frost's poetry is a testament to his masterful craftsmanship. Although his poetry can be interpreted from many angles, I feel saying that it is deceptive denotes a sinister air. It's malicious, it's malevolent, and that's not what Frost is doing. The idea that Frost is intentionally trying to mislead his audience. I believe that his poetry is accessible to all, whether they have the capability to see Frost as a nature poet or a poet of the human condition is secondary to the enjoyment they get from his aesthetic works. So, my final statement there is, it doesn't matter so much at what level they read Frost, as long as they can get something from it. Okay, so again, highlighting that yes, there are many different layers, but I remind my audience, my examiner, that I don't think it's deceptive. So, that is what I'm expecting from you guys. If we're looking at how we should break down paragraphs and all the rest, I think we'll go with an introduction, and if we can try and get one paragraph on each of the poems we've studied, that will be a good place to start. We can change that next year and start comparing two different poets, but right now I want you guys to focus on just one poem per paragraph and just, say this poem is seemingly simple, however, this is the deeper side. When we look closer, we can see that there's much more to this poem. Okay? That's what I'm looking for from you guys. I'd expect, 4 to 6 main body paragraphs. So we have our introduction, 4 to 6 main body paragraphs, and a conclusion. So you're looking at about 6 to 8 paragraphs total. That's what I expect from you guys. Okay, so let's see our learning intentions. Have we done what we were supposed to do? So interpret how exam questions are marked. Yeah, we somewhat looked at the codes. Highlight essay structure, criteria for the intro, the main body, and conclusion paragraphs. Identify and replicate the PQE structure of the main body paragraphs. So point, quote, explain the structure of the main body paragraphs, and examine what makes a good quote. So that's our last thing that we're going to be doing today. And hopefully we can find some half-decent quotes. We'll go with the nature versus nurture theme. So I believe quotes should be as quotes. So by that, I mean that first of all, they should be apt. That they should be appropriate. Okay? That they should be appropriate to the question. That they must be linked to the question. They must help our point. Next up, which is somewhat similar, is significant. Okay, now you may say that these are very, very similar, but appropriate and significant are a little bit different. Appropriate is that it fits our point being made, and significant means it needs to be powerful. It needs to be a big quote, not necessarily a long quote, but a powerful quote. There needs to be some sort of weight behind it. Okay. Next up, our quotes should be relatively short. If we're quoting 2 or 3 lines, our quote takes up a lot of our answer, but also it's hard to identify exactly what part of the quotation we're talking about. So shorter quotes are more specific, but they're also easier to remember. And finally, our last S is seamless. And this one is really, really important. This means that our quotes are incorporated, that they fit nicely within our paragraph, within our sentence. So as I said earlier on, our quotes should fit into the sentence. If we take away the quotation marks, the sentence should still make sense. So let's see if I've used as quotes in this next paragraph. So one of the most universally accessible aspects of frost poetry is the theme of nature. Very, very simple. Child loves nature. This theme is ubiquitous, comes up all the time in his poetry, but is merely one angle of his thematic prowess. Frost often catches our attention with natural imagery, and through this description explores complex issues on human nature. There is my point. Okay, so that's the point part of my answer, and I think I've made it quite well. The artistic trait can be seen when we are given descriptions of trees in Mending Wall. The speaker outlines the division of man by using the elegant metaphor, he is all pine and I am apple orchard. So nice, short quote. It is significant. Is it seamless? It's not very seamless because I kind of tee it up with this elegant metaphor. But we'll see what we can do in the next one. So it's apt, yes. It's significant, yes. And it's short, yes. I have found this to be a common vehicle for meaning in frost poetry, as it also arises when the speaker comes to his final epiphany in the tuft of flowers, by being inspired by a leaping tongue of bloom that was spared by the mower. Now this one, short, yes. Is it appropriate? Yes. Is it significant? Yes. And is it seamless? I believe so. So you can see here that this is my quotation part of the paragraph. This realization on the solidarity of mankind is expressed through a rustic narrative and natural imagery. So rustic just means rural. The connection between physical nature and human nature is an adept one, and one that has the potential to be overlooked if his poetry is not explored fully. So there is my explanation. Again, I think this is a solid paragraph that you guys can kind of base a lot of your answers on. PQE quotes are ask quotes, and we have a decent explanation here as well. So guys, as I said, those questions, I'm going to create an assignment on Teams, and you'll have until Sunday at midnight to turn that in. If you're having a problem with Teams, you can just email it to me, I'll correct it, get back to you, and give you your results. Okay, anybody doing ordinary level will receive a separate task to do, and I will walk you through that as well. Okay, feel free, if you have any problems, email me, and yeah, that is essentially it, guys. Take it easy.